Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6 o'clock, so I will call the Missoula City Council meeting of April 12th, 2021 to order. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a Zoom webinar. For those of you who would like to join the meeting, we have a variety of instructions that Ms. Rabine is putting up now. We also have a variety of ways that you can get to us. If you are a participant in the webinar, you may raise your hand to be recognized during the public comment components of the meeting. And if you're calling on the phone this evening, you can press *9 to raise your hand to be recognized for comment, and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And with that, note the record that councilors are present this evening except for Ms. Becerra and Ms. Anderson. We have minutes of the meeting of April 5th. Without objection, they'll be approved.
And I'm here, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties.
I lost all your video for a moment. Oh, and there's Ms. Anderson. I correct that for the record. All right, seeing no objections, we will schedule our committee meetings. Ms. Rabine.
Okay, Mary Engen. Thought we'd try something a little new tonight. Let's try this. No, that didn't work. Wrong screen. I was hoping to share the committee schedule, and that's what I clicked on, but it's not sharing now. All right, well, we'll just go with the same old, same old. We're setting up committee meetings for this coming Wednesday. That is April 14th of 2021. And we have quite a full day. So Parks and Conservation Committee will meet from 8:15 until 9:30 in the morning. Land Use and Planning Committee meets from 9:45 to 11:15. Public Safety and Health Committee meets from 11:30 to 12 o'clock. The Administration and Finance Committee will meet from 12:30 to 1 o'clock. Public Works Committee meets from 1:15 to 1:45. And Committee of the Whole Appointments Subcommittee meet from 2 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, all of these committee meetings are being held on Zoom webinar. And the way to access these meetings is to go to the city's website. You can just Google the City of Missoula and we're right there at the top of your search results. And then in the middle of our webpage, there's a button there called Meetings. That's the one you want to click on, and it has all of the meetings for all these committee meetings, as well as all of our boards and commissions. And all of the instructions for joining our Zoom webinars are on the top of each agenda. So hopefully folks will be able to find us there. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Little technical note this evening, ladies and gentlemen. I do not have internet at my home at the moment. That should be corrected tomorrow, but I'm using my telephone as a hotspot. So if I happen to fade away or disappear, I will ask that Council President Vaughn Rosberg step in until I can solve my problem. So I apologize for that in advance if something goes awry. We'll move on in our agenda to general public comment. This is your opportunity to comment on items not elsewhere on the agenda. And I see no hands raised. Oh, I do, sorry. A number of hands raised. We'll start with Mr. Rutledge. Mr. Rutledge.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Just make a few quick comments. Gosh, it's so unsightly, those trees being cut down on the Clark Fork River when I go for runs and bike rides, and when I'll probably be floating and recreating this summer. And I definitely understand some of that had to do with the Army Corps of Engineers, but I would be in support of Marlar's plan of possibly adding some more vegetation to that, to Marilyn Marlar. One other thing I wanted to hit on, I would like to maybe just float out there that we, especially when, we are having meetings with a lot of comments, potentially moving to back to a hybrid model as more folks are starting to get vaccinated regarding the pandemic, and maybe that you guys consider that maybe moving that direction or to be open to that in the near future. And then one other thing, it came to my attention from Citrus Friend that apparently there's a lockbox on the X's where people have been, performing on First Fridays and such during the pandemic. I was wondering, and I might feel free to get to me via email, but kind of whose decision was that, kind of to limit artistic expression, outside where people can relatively gather, safely. Just wanted to avoid some slight displeasure with that, and that if somebody wanted to use that, would they be able to? So feel free to follow up, and I'll be chiming back in on one of the ordinance that's up for final consideration later this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And I have a caller, the last four digits of your phone number are 9773. Hello, caller.
Okay, John, can you hear me?
We
John?
can, Philip.
Oh,
Yes,
good.
we can hear you.
I had trouble. Okay, Philip Perzik. I have been sending out some emails and speaking with a number of you on council, as well as Board of Regents, other people, about the University Area Parking District. Some of you might know that I spent 35 years defending it and advocating for it. I have changed my entire feeling about it over the last 5 years because in general, it has created enmity amongst neighbors both outside and inside the district. It takes, I don't know how many spaces and reserves them for private use by the residents of the neighborhood. And that's offensive to a lot of people. I've heard plenty about it over the years. And it's my strong and strong resolve to see it dismantled and go back to use as a public street as opposed to using it for individual homeowners. If there are questions, I can certainly enlarge on my feeling. But back when I was working on the district, I tried to we sat down, some of us, or I mainly, sat down with the ASUM with the possibility of taking about half those spaces and reassigning them to a lottery so anybody, including staff, faculty, and students at the University of Montana could use those sites, and the other half would be reserved for the neighborhood. If you calculate the value of those sites, I can't right now because I haven't talked to any engineers or anybody that builds parking structures, but years ago, a parking site was worth $10,000 or $20,000 a space to build, and I have no idea what that would cost. That would entail $2 to $4 million. It's probably closer to 10. Maybe I shouldn't even be using those kinds of numbers, but I know they're very expensive. And those sites should be used for what the intent of the public street is, for public use. So if anybody has questions on council, I'm certainly available. You have my email address. I think you have my phone number. But I would urge you, and I believe Mr. Nugent sent out a very extensive email at my request describing the structure and oversight of the parking district. And if he's there tonight, or he's on this call, he might be able to explain that. I know he could. And has an infinite capacity to understand the law. So anyway, does anyone have any questions?
If they do, we'll have them reach out to you, Mr. Perzig. And we've reached your 3 minutes, so we're in good shape.
All right. No, I was trying to keep it right at 3 minutes, Don. I think you know, I'm precise on every level.
Did just fine. Thank you, sir. Seeing no other general public comment this evening, we will move on to our consent agenda. Items on this agenda were approved in council committees to be placed on this agenda to save time on Mondays by voting on them as a package. Ms. Rabine will read the list aloud so folks watching on Zoom or MCAT or YouTube will know what we're considering, and we'll invite comment on these items before we vote. Ms. Rabine.
Okay. There my video goes. All right. Hang on, my fonts got really tiny on the screen here, so I'm going to click into each one. So it makes it a little bit bigger. Nope, they're all still tiny. Hang on. Let me see if I can make these bigger. There we go. All right. Tonight's consent agenda has 9 items. And the first one, as always, is to approve our bills. We're paying people who've done work for the city, and we call them claims. A lot of businesses call them accounts payable. And tonight we're paying claims or approving claims in the amount of $639,330.12. Number 2 is to award the bid for construction services for the Grant Creek Sewer Collection Improvement Project to Knife River for an amount not to exceed $932,025 and authorize the return of bid bonds. Number 3 is the first reading and preliminary adoption of an ordinance. Hang on, I'm going to click into this one because the motion is super long and it's not showing all the way on my screen, but now it is. We're doing a first reading and preliminary adoption on this ordinance or setting a public hearing for April 26th of 2021. Folks should remember that City Council right now is conducting a public hearing and holding it open for a week. So come on the 26th or the following week. And the council is proposing to preliminarily adopt an ordinance of the City Council, amending Chapter 12.24 of Missoula Municipal Code entitled Excavations, amending sections 12.24.020, 12.24.030, 12.24.040, 12.24.090, and 12.24.100, which increase, and the ordinance is proposed to increase the time for work to commence on an excavation permit or on a permit from 15 days to 180 days, so an substantial increase. Provide for remedies when permitted work doesn't meet standards, modify the requirements for resurfacing, and add stormwater permits to the list of required excavation permits. Moving on to number 4. The motion here is to adopt a resolution of intention to close and vacate the south approximately 30 feet of Patty Street. That's located in downtown Missoula. It lies north of Bess Reed Park and at the southern end of Patty Street cul-de-sac. And is described in Exhibit A of the resolution of intention. The council setting a public hearing on that matter for May 3rd of 2021. Our next one is item 5, and the motion here is to adopt a resolution of the Missoula City Council to adopt the 2018 Water System Master Plan and the 2019 Wastewater Facility Plan and the 2018 Stormwater Facility and Operations Plan project to secure state revolving fund loans from the state of Montana for the city of Missoula's utility capital improvement projects. Number 6 is Also, the first reading and preliminary adoption of an ordinance. Tonight, City Council is setting a public hearing for April 26th of 2021 and preliminarily adopting an ordinance of the City Council, amending Missoula Municipal Code Title 12, Chapter 12.44, Article 3, entitled Cemetery Director, to rename it Cemetery Superintendent, and amend Section 12.44.340 entitled Duties to allow for the Cemetery Director to now be known as the Cemetery Superintendent to follow the position structure within the Department of Public Works and Mobility. Number 7 is also an ordinance. City Council is doing first reading and preliminary adoption of this ordinance. Its title is long, so here we go. We're setting the public hearing for April 26, 2021, and preliminarily adopting an ordinance amending Missoula Municipal Code Title 12, Chapter 12.44. This is also in the Missoula City Cemetery Ordinance. It has an ordinance number here, but that'll change because we'll assign a new ordinance number to this one if it's adopted. As follows: Section 12.44.010 entitled Establish to allow for additional operation activities of the cemetery is approved by the City Council. Section 12.44.030 entitled Records to remove the requirement that the cemetery retain obituaries. Section 12.44.070 entitled Reserve Funds to allow revenue generated from niche sales to be merged into the Cemetery Capital Fund Reserve. Section 12.44.050 entitled Conveyance of Assignment to clarify how a grave, niche, mausoleum, memorial, or cremation location can be assigned. Section 12.44.110B entitled Grounds Regulations, removing and for no other purpose and adding and for other purposes or acts intrinsic to the operations of a cemetery or is approved by the Missoula City Council. Section 12.44.120 entitled Interment Arrangements to comply with the proposed changes in conveyance and to remove fees for reinterment. Section 12.44.170 entitled Monument Placement to reduce restrictions on monument placement, and Section 12.44.245 entitled Sections by amending subsection 1 to include a pet, I'm going to mispronounce it. I think it says ossuary. And move the current subsection 1 to a new subsection J. Next one's a little easier. We are confirming some police officers. We're confirming Ben Gropman, Michael Hoffman, Cooper Guy, Brandon LaRock to the Missoula Police Department. So we're confirming them as police officers. Number 9 is to confirm the mayor's reappointment of Dan Cedarberg to the Business Improvement District Board as a member at large for a term that begins June 1st, 2021 and expires on May 31st of 2025. And I think that's it for the consent agenda tonight, folks.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any questions or comments from council members regarding the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, anyone in the audience care to comment? Seeing none there, we will have a roll call vote.
Okay, on the consent agenda. Hang on just a second. Anderson.
Yes.
Contos.
Yes.
Harp.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Merritt.
Yes.
Ramos.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Vasika.
Yes.
Von Losberg.
Yes.
And West.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 11 ayes and 1 absent.
And the consent agenda is approved. We know from boards, commissions, staff for the community forum this evening. We do have one special presentation in the form of a proclamation. Whereas, ladies and gentlemen, the safety and well-being of its citizens continues to be one of the foremost concerns of the city of Missoula. Ensuring that safety and well-being requires the ability to receive calls for help and immediately send responders to provide that help. And whereas 911 is the first critical link in the chain in delivering public safety services, and whereas the safety of those responding to emergencies is also of great concern to the city of Missoula, and whereas the telecommunicators who work in 911 display a superior level of commitment, dedication, and professionalism in accomplishing their mission of receiving calls for help from citizens, dispatching emergency response agencies, and maintaining a communication link with the responders for safety purposes. And whereas those same telecommunicators often work extraordinarily long hours and difficult schedules to provide this service to the public and to ensure the safety of responders, but often go unrecognized. And whereas amid the current public health emergency and global pandemic of COVID-19, these telecommunicators continue to report for duty every day to ensure the continuity of this critical mission. Now, therefore, I, John Engen, Mayor of the City of Missoula and the state of Montana, do hereby recognize the week of April 11th through 17th, 2021 as National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. And I thank the telecommunicators in 911 for all of their efforts and hours and hard work under difficult circumstances. The community truly would not be safe without them. I also encourage the community to recognize the importance of the function of 911 and to thank these dedicated individuals in writing. That is a proclamation, and I do thank those fine folks at 911 who go unsung but are at the front lines of taking care of our residents every day. We'll move on to the public hearing portion of our agenda. State law and our own council rules set guidelines for providing comment in a formal way on a variety of issues, and following a staff report on each, the council and I will invite comment. Through the pandemic, we have been holding public hearings open for a week following staff presentation, and then voting the following week or the next council meeting, unless there's a requirement for final action on the night of the public hearing. The lone public hearing this evening is not an emergency. We will therefore keep this public hearing open until council's next meeting for final consideration. And the question before the body this evening is, pardon me, an amendment to Article 3 of our park and open space and requirements, clarifying cash in lieu methodologies for determining value. And our staff report this evening comes from Mr. Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Grant Carlton, Open Space Program Manager, Missoula Parks and Recreation. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Hopefully it works. Let me know if it doesn't. Are you guys seeing that?
Yes, sir.
Yes. All right. So I am here tonight to discuss a proposed subdivision regulation amendment to Article 3, Section 080.7 of the city subdivision regulations, which we call the cash in lieu of parkland dedication requirements. And just some brief sort of, logistics on where these things are housed. Article 3 is our design review standards in the sort of more comprehensive subdivision regulations. And Section 080 dictates our park and open space requirements. And then 080.7, like I said, is the cash in lieu of parkland dedication language. Before we dive into the proposal, I wanted to just highlight some the timeline and the process moving forward. So we were at Planning Board last Tuesday, April 6th for a public hearing, and I'll summarize that meeting and the deliberation there in just a moment. Of course, tonight we're opening the council public hearing. We will be back at Land Use Planning Committee to continue the discussion, gather more public comment at the committee level on Wednesday, the 14th. We were at Land Use Planning back in February, I believe, to sort of discuss initial plans and proposals. And then, as Mr. Mayor mentioned, we will be holding open the public hearing until next Monday, April 19th, if all goes as planned, in which case we will hold the final consideration and vote. So ample opportunity for the public to comment. And we hope that the public does. I know that you all are well steeped, and for better or for worse, probably intimately familiar with what cash in lieu is and means. But for those of us out in the public that might not be as well steeped, I want to just to provide some background and context of what we're talking about here. So parkland dedication is part of our subdivision review process. Council, along with appropriate boards, whether it be park board, planning board, and as well as city staff, decide when cash in lieu of parkland dedication is warranted. So when a subdivision application is received, there are a couple of different factors we look at, and dependent upon those factors, we sort of dictate what is required of parkland dedication. So it could be parkland dedication itself. It could be cash in lieu of that parkland dedication, which is what we're specifically talking about tonight, or some combination thereof. And again, without going into the detail, there's a number of factors that dictate that sort of decision. The impetus for the current open space and park requirements, sort of as we know them, that are currently housed in the subdivision regulations, was the 2004 Master Parks and Recreation Plan development. When we were going through that process, it was made abundantly clear that Missoulians desire quality, high level open space opportunities, and they desire those opportunities close to home. These notions were further highlighted by the recent Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Trails Survey. And I also wanted to mention this is sort of this notion of keeping pace with growth and providing high quality open space opportunities close to where people live is critical as we navigate the ongoing Mullen area, the planning process in the Mullen area with Missoula County. As our community grows and evolves, and it certainly is, the city is experiencing an upward trend in new subdivision applications. And with that upward trend in applications, the city has recently experienced issues related specifically to demonstration of fair market value when we're going to calculate these cash in lieu figures. This is, I'll dive into that in more detail in a moment. This is arguably due to some ambiguous language that currently exists, which I'll highlight. And then I also, before moving on, wanted to note that cash in lieu is a substantial and critical funding source for furthering our community adopted parkland and open space goals, some of which I just mentioned as part of the Master Parks Plan. Some high level objectives of this proposal. So as we go through the rest of this presentation, before we do so, I wanted to sort of provide the overlying objectives, because I think it's a really good way to sort of, it's a lens to look at the rest of this information through, and I think it's a good framework. So first and foremost, we want to support community adopted goals with respect to providing high quality parkland and open space amenities, like I mentioned in the last slide. And a couple of enumerated objectives pulled straight from the 2004 Master Parks Plan. Provide an open space opportunity within a 10 to 12 minute walk of every resident. And I have opportunity in quotation marks there because, we're not just talking about parks, we're talking about natural areas, trail connections, playgrounds, commuter trails, just a wide variety of different, open space amenities. Also in the Master Parks Plan is the goal of providing 2.5 acres of neighborhood parks and 4.5 acres of community parks for every 1,000 residents. And so again, we're trying to, we're speaking to livability and quality of living and, attracting folks to our community. And it was made clear that, people in Missoula really value these open space opportunities. And as we grow, we need to, it's been, demonstrated that we need to keep pace with that as as development happens and where it happens. And the next objective is to create a predictable, clear, and efficient process. This has been, in all the discussions we've had at land use planning, planning board, this has been the underlying theme of this proposal. We've consulted with internal staff in community planning, development, innovations, Parks and Rec staff, city legal, the development community as well, and it is clear that a predictable, clear, and efficient process will benefit all. And that is the sort of the ancillary benefit, is that this is mutually beneficial. If the system works, and we hope that it will with this proposal, the public and the development community benefit. And all of this feeds into saving valuable staff time. Like I mentioned, we've experienced some issues and some challenges related to demonstration of fair market value. And that's partially a product of the current language. And if we can resolve that, we can allow our staff and city leadership to focus on, other important projects. We will always, of course, be there to, talk to the development community when it's necessary. Some of the purposes and objectives of parkland dedication regulations pulled straight from Section 3 of our subdivision regulations. What are we trying to achieve here with these regulations? And this is an exhaustive list pulled verbatim, and I'm going to read through it quickly. And I do apologize for the verbosity of my presentation. I did want to mention that I want this presentation to sort of stand alone, so that it can provide a sort of a reference and some guidance outside of this presentation. So back to the objectives. Preserve and protect wildlife habitat, agricultural uses, historic and cultural features, scenic views, and other desirable natural environment features. Provide open space areas for conservation and passive recreation. Provide active recreational areas, so passive and active recreational uses for use by residents and the community. Implement our plans, our open space plan, our non-motorized transportation plan, Missoula County Parks and Conservation Plan, and of course the Master Parks Plan. Provide areas for social interaction and livability, functional and accessible use by residents of development and community. So again, this is pulled straight from Section 3 of our subdivision regulations. And, as you can see, some of these things are what makes Missoula, Missoula, at least in large part. It's no secret that Missoulians value our open space portfolio, our natural areas, our public lands, and our connectivity to those. Which leads me to how can these cash in lieu funds be used? And this is pulled directly from Title 76, Chapter 3 of Montana state law. And so there's a pretty, good variety and diversity of ways in which these funds can be used. To acquire, develop, or maintain parks or recreational areas to serve the subdivision. More generally speaking, these funds are typically used to serve the subdivision itself. So they're either deployed in the subdivision directly adjacent to the subdivision or within close proximity, which, as you'll see, is dictated by state law. So these funds have to be used within a reasonably close proximity to the subdivision. We can purchase public open space or conservation easements. These expenses must be part of a formally adopted plan or similar document that establishes the needs in the process. I mentioned several, the one at the forefront being the 2004 Master Parks Plan. And we can use up to 50% of these dedicated funds for park maintenance. So we can acquire land, we can develop land. So that means, park infrastructure, playgrounds, vegetation, restoration, things like that. And we can also use them to maintain those amenities and that land. This is a non-exhaustive list. This is just some high-level recent examples of past cash in lieu investments in the community. I won't read through these, but what I do want to mention is that, as you can see, there's a solid diversity of different types of investments, from trail construction to playing fields, park shelters, playgrounds, vegetative planting, bike parks, park shelters. It's a pretty wide gamut there of what these funds have been invested in the past. And this is sort of a visual depiction of those projects throughout our community. I just wanted to highlight that one of our other objectives is to distribute these funds geographically, and as you can see, I think that we've achieved that, and the idea is to continue to achieve that sort of geographic distribution where development and growth occurs. Getting into the sort of proposal, the proposal itself, and this is sort of redundant, but again, I want to really highlight that this cash in lieu funding is really critical to meeting our objectives that I've kind of covered in the past few minutes of providing these high quality parks, open space, trails in every neighborhood. And this allows us to keep pace with a growing community, and we are certainly growing. And all of this leads us to furthering serving the interest of the public. And that's again, the overlying idea is to serve the interest of the public. And that's delineated right in the subdivision regulations for our open space and park requirements. We're also attempting to address a zoning designation language ambiguity, which on the next slide we'll look at the actual proposed language, and I can point you to that. And we're also trying to create a more, like I said, consistent, predictable, clear, and efficient process. Again, I'm being redundant, but this is mutually beneficial to both the public and the development community if the system works. And I wanted to highlight some numbers really quickly. So I mentioned some issues we've experienced at the city related to these appraisals and the demonstration of fair market value. We've received a range anywhere from in an 18-month span from $2 a square foot up to $12+ per square foot And I certainly understand that not every property is the same. We have different zoning designations and different sizes and different factors, but we're seeing a pretty glaring inconsistency among similar projects. And we're not pointing any fingers here. It's inconsistent. And again, we're trying to create some predictability and some consistency. And we think that this proposal will further that objective. So this is a very wordy slide. I don't even know if it's legible here on certain screens, but we've got, this is the actual proposed language. I don't have a red line version. It was included in the materials if you do want to see those in line, but this is the clean version of the proposal. And I wanted to highlight what I sort of classify as 3 primary revisions. In the first paragraph, there was some language around zoning designation and the time it would apply. And so to that, we're not actually changing anything. What we're doing is creating a little bit of clarity. And what we're saying is, if you can see my cursor here, the fair market value is the value of the unsubdivided, unimproved land. So that's not changing. And that's based upon the zoning designation that will apply to the subdivision at the time the final plat is submitted for approval. So again, we're not actually changing anything. We're just cleaning up the language a bit to note that the zoning designation at the time of final plat is what will be applied when we're looking at the value of this land. The second change is here in subsection A. So in the current language, we do require an appraisal report, which we still do in this proposal. Nothing's changing there. It is the fee of that appraisal report was in the current language and is in this proposal the responsibility of the subdivider. So no new costs or requirements. The major distinction is that instead of the subdivider hiring and choosing the appraiser, that will be borne by the city. The city will hire the appraiser and commission the appraisal. And again, the subdivider will be responsible for that fee. I'll speak a little bit more to the end of how that will happen. So I'll get into detail in just a moment, but the idea is that we will, through RFQ process, have a pool of appraisers to choose from. And so again, the only distinction here is that the city will hire the appraiser as opposed to the subdivider. No new fees or requirements. Subsection B is the third primary change. That is additional language that isn't included in the current subdivision regulation. And this allows for A and B, of course, are the 2 ways that we are showing demonstration of fair market value, and B allows for the submission of a recent purchase and sale agreement or other executed contract that evidences a sale price of the property if it was purchased within 1 year of the date of the final plat submittal, and if it was, and assuming that the zoning isn't changing. So again, this is a new way to demonstrate fair market value that didn't exist in the current language. It is hopefully, it allows a potential subdivider the ability to, not commission an expensive appraisal report, save a bit of time on the part of the city and the subdivider. So again, a new way to demonstrate fair market value that didn't previously exist. It's worth noting that we're not venturing into uncharted seas here. This proposal is not new. It is not a novel idea. We did along the way consult with several different communities around Montana, and of course, with the development community and city staff all across the board. And I've got a couple examples here. This one's from Billings. In Billings, and again, and moving back a little bit, we did pull different pieces from those examples, different pieces of process that seemed to work. So that was the idea, and that's the product you're seeing. So here's Billings, and Billings allows for 3 options for demonstrating fair market value. The first is a comparative market analysis performed by a realtor. And subsections 1, 2, and 3 there are sideboards on the comps used to create that market analysis. The second one is a raw land appraisal by a licensed appraiser, which is similar to our subsection A. And then subsection C here is the sale price of the property if it was purchased within 1 year, which is similar to our subsection B. So we are not allowing for subsection A here, and that's primarily because we decided that an appraisal creates a more legitimate and sort of defensible, transparent report. So we will sort of convey our expectations related to these, comparable sale sideboards to the appraisers via our professional services contract. So, we're not far off from Billings here. B and C are our 2 options, and I think there's defensible rationale for not allowing the comparative market analysis. We decided that would be achieved by the appraisal. Here's an example from Kalispell, fairly similar. Worth noting in subsection A there from Kalispell, it shall be the responsibility of the subdivider to provide satisfactory evidence of fair market value. So that's how the process starts in Kalispell. You'll notice there's no guidance on how that fair market value is demonstrated. To me, and in consultation with city legal and other folks in the city and development community, that is not providing clarity. That's an open-ended statement which leads to challenges. And so we decided to actually explicitly call out how we want our fair market value to be demonstrated. Looking at subsection C there, the process moves along. If there is a disagreement on the actual value, that is when the city steps in and requires a fair market value be established by an appraisal, which the city hires and chooses. So we're along the same lines there as Kalispell. Again, the distinction is that the city hires the appraiser as opposed to the developer, which I'll go into more detail with respect to that in just a second. As I mentioned back last Tuesday, April 6th, we took this before the planning board for a public hearing. I wanted to highlight that deliberation and discussion. And before I do that, I wanted to note that there was some good, robust conversation, and it was a split board. The motion did ultimately fail on a close vote of 5-4. The votes in opposition were generally related to the above comments, which I'll go through in just a moment, and entailed 2 sort of vastly opposing stances and a spectrum all in between. And those 2 stances were that the proposal does not ensure sufficient parklands or cash in lieu to meet our objectives, which I sort of have discussed here this evening, versus all the way to the other end of the spectrum of requiring too much cash in lieu and being sort of overly burdensome on the development community. And then sort of, other folks fell sort of somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. The deliberation and discussion included, transparency and fairness, and how that is a key focal point when choosing the pool of appraisers through the RFQ public process. The board discussed that actual RFQ process and a desire to sort of renew that process every 3 to 5 years to ensure fairness in selection. There was mention of developers having a chance to weigh in on an appraisal selection using objective criteria. There was a question of whether or not there should be the ability on the subdivider's behalf to challenge the appraisal. There was also, and we'll talk about all these sort of in detail in line here. There was also discussion specifically related to subsection B. There was some concern that subsection B, if you recall, is the allowance to provide a contract that demonstrates fair market value via a recent sale. There was discussion around ensuring that those transactions are arm's length. And then lastly, we want the board discuss ensuring that the city has the actual ability to carry out the intent of parkland and open space requirements. So again, in line, the appraisal procurement process. So the idea here is that community appraisers will be invited to submit qualifications via our standard RFQ process. Again, this is not reinventing the wheel. This is something that the city, goes through and navigates probably on a weekly basis. If you look at all the departments, it's a transparent public process. And like I mentioned, also the development community does have the potential to provide input or ranking based on objective criteria or review of the criteria prior to posting the RFQ. So we will allow the development community and the public to have some input on how we go about selecting that pool of appraisers to ensure, fairness and inclusivity. Again, we will have the potential for new RFQ procurement process every 3 to 5 years to ensure fairness in appraiser selection, to make sure we're not leaving anybody out. Assuming that they are qualified. We will have limitations on length of contract for selected appraisers. And then the city will engage, this is sort of an on the ground detail, the city will engage the selected pool of approximately 2 to 5 appraisers via professional services contracts. The number of appraisers in that pool is sort of dependent upon the number of applicants that we receive. The next point, and this one was fairly widely discussed, and the question of whether or not the developer should have the ability to challenge the actual appraisal. First and foremost, the subdivider, as always, has opportunity to discuss the appraisal and to challenge it directly with city council. So that's still our backstop. That is obviously retained. And that is obviously always on the table. We have decided, at least at this point in our recommendation, not to include an explicit avenue of challenging the actual appraisal. And that is for a couple of different reasons. First, the development community, like I said, will have input in developing the RFQ and criteria used to select these appraisers. So this will be a robust, transparent process with development community input. And so the idea is that this will manifest an appraiser pool of highly qualified independent professionals. That's not to say that every appraiser in our appraisal community isn't highly qualified, but different appraisers have different specialties and experience and knowledge base. And so we want to ensure that we're procuring appraisers that have the relevant qualifications and knowledge. And then we also want to avoid scenarios in which one professional community, meaning the development community challenges another, the appraisal community. I think, again, we're trying to create a consistent, predictable process, and one that's also efficient. And so I think if the system works and we have a transparent process for selecting this pool, the idea is that we will eliminate or reduce the need to challenge the appraisal. And then again, a discussion around, this is specific to subsection B, ensuring arm's length transactions. We don't explicitly call it out in the current proposal. Again, this is the allowance to provide a contract that shows a recent sale price in lieu of going through the appraisal process. I wanted to quickly highlight the definition of arm's length of or relating to transactions between two parties who are independent and do not have a close relationship with each other. Presumably, these parties have equal bargaining power and are not subject to undue pressure or influence from the other party. So essentially, legitimate arm's length transactions are sort of meet this definition. Staff does recommend adding an arm's length transaction qualifier to subsection B. And staff can provide specific language for the LUP meeting in consideration if council so chooses. And I will end just showing a couple of examples, some visual examples of some of the community investment that Cash in Lieu has made possible. So this is Milwaukee Trail, the stretch from Russell to Reserve, and you can see that on the map there. Kim Williams to Canyon River Trail connection east of town. We've got the Bellevue Bike Park south of town. The High Park Trail, this was trail construction up in the South Hills. This is the playground at 44 Ranch. Here's another playground at Pleasant View Park. And this is our very own Nathan McLeod's son at the Bellevue Bike Park, enjoying it. And that is all I have tonight. Thanks for bearing with me.
Thank you, Mr. Carlton. With that, I will open the public hearing. And again, this public hearing will remain open until council takes this item up for final consideration. And on to our participants here for a moment. All right, my apologies here. All right, with that, I have one comment from the audience. Mr. Larson.
Yeah, this is Matt Larson, Ward 3. I think some of these wordings are good, but overall, I think we got here to this confusing place where we're at right now with such a huge boost in market value of housing, and like just we're inflating more costs here by adding more regulation. That's my opinion. I really don't think it's disputable, though. I think the regulation really doesn't show much significant change, like in wording, and I think it really does allow for a lot more manipulation by the city through the RFQ process. All the talking points are pretty big ones. I think stuff needs to happen with this, but it looks like it's pretty contentious already. It looks like I don't even really have to weigh in on this one to see all the hands in the council about the wording of this. So we have an affordable housing crisis, and we have wage disparity, and we need to address this like soon. And I don't see why there's any reason why people can't do an RFQ for appraisers yearly. And that at least gets some some turnover in this narrow pool that the city is intentionally narrowing this selection from. So I don't know. It seems very suspicious to me, but maybe I'm not your biggest fans.
And the public hearing will remain open. I have a number of council members who wish to ask questions, I'm assuming, keeping in mind that you'll be considering this for final consideration later. Ms. Merritt.
Grant, if I understand correctly, we're seeing this in committee on Wednesday too. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out that the item that's attached that says proposed amendment language red line is not actually the red line version of it. At least when I open it up, I don't see that. So I just wanted to point that out. Maybe we can get that corrected. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Merritt.
Yeah, I'll look at
Ms.
that.
Jones.
Thanks. I just had a request, Mr. Carlton, if you could attach your presentation to the document so we can see that prior to Wednesday. I think that would be helpful because there was a lot of good information in it.
Ms. Hart.
Thank you. Grant, I was wondering if, in addition to the presentation not being on our website, I noticed that this is not one of our Engage Missoula contents. I'm wondering if there was a reason why it did not make it to that particular website.
It should be on Engage Missoula. Yeah, last I checked.
You might want to double check because just moments ago I could not find it. Doesn't mean it's probably user error on my end, but just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Interesting, thanks.
Yep. And then additionally, can you also give us a little background on how you engage specifically with the development community to get feedback from them, as this is going to affect their bottom line?
Sure. Do you want me to do that right now?
If we have time, I'd love to hear that.
Sure. So yeah. So I don't have the dates in front of me. Actually, perhaps I do. Give me 1 second. So back several weeks ago, we did. I sent out an agency and interested party memo via email to a list of the development community, real estate agents, engineers, interested stakeholders, from a list that I received from the planning department and other sources, with sort of the proposal, the language, and an invitation to provide public comment. I also, alerted them to the posting on Engage Missoula, and that was, that's been several weeks ago. I have not received a single comment either directly via email, phone call, or through Engage Missoula from anyone in that community. There was no public comment at the planning board hearing either. And so other than that, I think, the information was sent out, the proposal was sent out, and we did invite public comment. We also had a land use planning, we laid out our sort of intentions and plan. That was even several weeks before the email was sent out. And so, and we're going back to committee on Wednesday. And yeah, I guess the bottom line is we just haven't received a lot of feedback.
Okay, thank you.
It's Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. I have some questions that I'll save until Wednesday, since we have a week and we're just opening the public hearing right now. But just to give you a heads up, I would like to see some, I know we're talking about potentially how we ensure that we review the request for a proposal or RFQ or whatever every 3 to 5 years, but I'd like to see some way to have that kind of built into it. So making it less of a potential, and you don't need to respond to that. We can talk about that Wednesday, but that is something that I would like to investigate more.
All right, with that, the public hearing will remain open. We have no additional public hearings this evening. I'm sorry, Mr. Von Lossberg.
Sorry, I was just going to point out it is on Engage Missoula. I just did a check. There might be a way to get it bumped up perhaps, so it's worth looking at, but there is an entry. The title is Parkland Dedication Amendment, I believe.
Okay. Thank you, sir. With that, we will move on to items for final consideration. Items here have had a public hearing. That hearing was held open to allow time for additional comment before final consideration before the governing body, and the chairperson of the City Council Standing Committee will make a motion regarding these items, and we'll invite comment as well. Our first is on a rezoning, and Mr. Hess.
Thank you, Mayor. Bear with me for a moment while I get to the proper screen here. So I move that on second and final reading, we adopt an ordinance to rezone the subject properties located at 1315, 1319, 1321, 1321 and a half, 1323, 1325, 1327 Defoe Street, 1127 and 1131 Shakespeare Street, and 1120 Burton Street, legally described as lots 1 through 10 in block 61 of the school edition, located in section 16, township 13 north, range 19 west, principal meridian, Montana, from RT 2.7 2-unit townhouse to B1-1 neighborhood business. Mayor, you appear to be
Mayor.
muted.
Yeah.
I apologize. I was giving you all some feedback. Seeing no, is there discussion on the motion? Sorry. All right, seeing none. Anyone in the audience care to comment? Mr. Larson.
Yes, Matt Larson, Ward 3. I'm surprised and shocked that no one in council wants to reference all the public comment that's listed on the agenda that expresses concern about the density being tripled in this area. So it looks like, you know, to me, again, cash in lieu, no parking, no parklands, and overall just yuppie hellscape is what this city council is hell bent on doing. You change it from R2-7 to B1-1, and that's what happens. You're getting high rises. You're building up as opposed to having sensible regulations in place to build out sensibly. It's utterly mind-boggling. It's totally antithetical to what the city council says they're doing. They say they're addressing affordable housing, and while they do that, they bend over backwards for developers. It's disgusting. It's so horrible to see this being done to our city right now. And no one on city council even wants to mention the numerous public comments that are on the agenda. They just do what they want. They don't care even. And it's really sad when they purport to care. It's really disappointing. Thank you.
You're still muted, Mayor.
My apologies. I have Ro Aaron.
Hi, Ro Aaron, Ward 1, representing myself as a neighbor. I just wanted to humanize these neighbors who are being displaced. I know that several of them have already moved on and found other housing, but I did just chat with 2 of the neighbors this afternoon. There's 3 families that still remain who have not been able to find housing and are still residing in this area. One person I talked to has been living in Missoula her whole life. She's a single mom. She works. She has good credit. She's been applying for apartments and housing, paying the equivalent of a full month's rent and application fees. She does not know where she's going to be living in a few weeks. I spoke with a friend of an elderly couple that lives in one of the trailers. The friend shared that these folks are living with disabilities and have no other options of places to live. I understand and support this idea of infill and that we need higher density housing, and that, you know, this is necessary for us to address the housing crisis, but I just don't want us to forget about folks who are being displaced during this process. And I know the suggestion was made, I believe by Julie Merritt, that some of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund money to be used to help these folks find housing to get to pay for some of these, just that like little bit of money you need to get into a new housing situation. And I just want to put that request out there and ask that we really address this before this zoning is passed, that we not leave these families behind, and we really consider the humans that are being impacted by this development. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Housel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Andy Helsel, Ward 2. I just want to echo what Ro just said, which is that I support increased density. I have never come to council and done the not in my neighborhood stuff. I know folks from other neighborhoods do that all the time. It's important that we have increased density in order to address our need for housing in this community, and not just housing stock, but affordable housing stock. But there are 3 families there who have had notice from the property owner and have yet still been unable to find new housing. So those people exist. Those are people who will potentially end up displaced and receiving services from the Poverello or other, frankly, quite limited services in our community. I think we're lucky that it's April, but this is not okay. This is not what we're looking for. So every time that a new development comes in, we need to have policies and procedures in place that ensure that the people who are removed out of affordable housing in order to put new housing there have somewhere to go. That's our responsibility as a community. It's your responsibility as city officials. And I would ask that each and every one of you go and meet the neighbors who will not have housing in a couple of weeks after you pass this zoning change. Meet your neighbors. Ask them what it is they need. Whether there are solutions in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund or elsewhere, I don't know, because it's not, I don't get paid to understand all the details of those things. But there are people in the city who do, and I would urge you to be creative and find solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Forsting.
Paul Forsting, IBEG. I'm a land use planner for IMEG Corporation. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I didn't bring my PowerPoint. I've got a PowerPoint I could show, but we've looked at it a couple times now. So I just wanted to make myself available for questions or comments. It's a very difficult situation with folks living on the site, and everybody was given notice last summer of this process. We had a neighborhood meeting over the summer in July. And all, the tenants were all to be vacated by February. The landowner actually, because the schedule of the project wasn't going to mandate that they leave by February, extended the leases for a couple of the home residents there. And so they're not going to be kicked out next week per se. They still have a couple months on their lease, and they're not looking to move them out quickly necessarily. It's just been, it is difficult when, mobile homes, these are mainly mobile homes, and mobile homes aren't permitted in the city. You're not seeing new mobile home parks go into the city. I don't know that they're allowed. And they're certainly very difficult at the county level to get approved. They're very difficult. And so we have a lot of them in the city of Missoula, and we're seeing a lot of them being removed for different various infill housing. And I don't know what the right answer is. You can't just fix up a mobile home that's been there for 30 years and keep using it as a renting, or we shouldn't do that. There's going to be continued pressure on these to be converted into stick-built houses. You don't see mobile homes in a lot of mature cities in the United States, and they probably were there at one time. They just get moved out, and it's a difficult situation, and that nobody really enjoys. So that's what I would add.
Thank you, sir. All right, council members now have hands up. Ms. Merritt.
Thanks. I know that the owners of the property had said that they had made offers to the residents that were still there to move into one of this owner's other properties. And I don't really want to put anyone terribly on the spot, but I wonder if we could understand why that offer wasn't accepted, perhaps by these last 3 residents that are on this property. And Paul, I don't know if you have answers to that.
Sorry, I need to allow Mr. Forsting to talk.
All right. I guess I would defer to Krissa Velde. She's one of the property owners, and she had explained that to us. So if she's here today, I believe she is. Mayor, if you could, but I can just re-summarize. And I don't know why they weren't able to relocate those tenants, but there was a conversation about relocation. And I don't know if Chris's hand is up, but she had those conversations, and so I don't know what the situation is and why.
Mr. Forsting, her hand is up, so we will allow her to speak
right, thank
for herself here. Ms. Velde.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Yes, we can hear you. Sorry, Ms. Velde, do we have you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, my apologies.
Okay, thank you. So we were able to put one of the tenants into a 1-bedroom, and then we tried the others, and the single mom mentioned she couldn't accept because it was her and her son, so she didn't want a 1-bedroom. And then one person is actually not really a tenant. I had a friend who is homeless, and I had these empty places that are just waiting to be torn down, so I let him stay there. So he has a plan in May. And then this remaining couple, I'm really concerned about. They are partnered up with Three Rivers Mental Health, and I don't know if they're getting much help from those guys. So if anyone can help house these two, that would be really good. We're looking for
Great.
something.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Velde. Mr. Hess.
Thanks. So I want to acknowledge that this is a function of broader problems in our community, in our housing market, that this is not ideal. This is completely unideal. This is, there are lives at stake. There are, livelihoods and places to live. And I recognize that. And I appreciate that people have called in tonight to humanize this. I truly appreciate that. We live in a property rights state. We have a legislature that is on a tear right now, going hog wild to actively gut local controls, to actively limit cities and towns' abilities to mandate affordability, to actively remove the protections of zoning. And this is bad. This is preemption in a bad way. And it's preempting an already bleak housing situation that the city is doing its damnedest to address through a housing policy. So I appreciate the folks who have called in to tell us that the house is on fire from an affordability standpoint. I really do. And it's not lost on me that this is that we have some real problems in our housing market and in our housing situation. And I count my blessings every night that I go to bed in my warm, comfortable bed that is a couple blocks from this rezone. So I guess that's sort of my rant. I am looking forward to the day when our Affordable Housing Trust Fund is fully implemented, when it is funded at a greater level. I want to highlight that it is funded many-fold greater than it was initially planned to be funded in the first year. I think that there's some really good work afoot in the city of Missoula from an affordable housing standpoint. But the city of Missoula is engaged in a Sisyphean effort to we're pushing a rock uphill here, folks, and I appreciate everyone recognizing that. Thank you.
Ms. West.
Sorry, I have to hit the right buttons. I really appreciate Jordan's statements just now. I think that it's a community-wide, in many cases statewide, many cases national issue, and these case-by-case bases are heartbreaking, and it's also outside of the scope of the decision that we get to make today, which is very hard. It's hard. And in spite of, I think, the knowledge that this isn't a great situation, I really appreciate the work that both the developers and the owners of this property and the city have done to find a zoning designation that meets both our growth policy and is a compromise between the existing zoning districts in this area. This is not an area that should have been zoned light industrial, which is what the natural fit would have been to expand, or not natural fit, but if the higher density existing zoning district had been expanded, that's what would have ended up here. And while the zoning district that's recommended maybe seems odd, it being a business district, it's I think it was Cassie did a great job last week explaining why that was chosen and or recommended by staff, and what I guess needs of the neighborhood it addressed with that choice. Most significantly being what uses are permitted in this area, as well as the height of construction, to provide something that fits better with the existing neighborhood. And I just wanted to highlight, I guess, the effort that was made to find something that fits and meets the growth policy's need.
Ms. Hart?
I just want to be clear, Mayor, that we're taking comments at this point.
Yeah, this is council discussion on the ordinance. Yep.
I just want to make sure, sorry. I want to say thank you to the owner of this property for doing the very best that she could to work with these folks that are being displaced. I know we've had a number of projects in our past where that hasn't necessarily been the case, and it seems to me in this particular project that not only is she trying to do the right thing, she is doing the right thing. And kudos to trying to do it. It's not easy, and I definitely do appreciate it. And at our last LUP meeting, Paul was able to show us some illustrations and photographs of past projects that this particular developer has done. And I'm happy to see that kind of initiative, because oftentimes we make decisions without having any estimate whatsoever of what the outcome would actually look like. The other thing I wanted to point out is in that last meeting, Paul mentioned that they're targeting a rent of about $1,200 a month, which I'm sure is more than what the current residents have been paying, but still falls into what folks between 40 and 80% of area median income can qualify for. And if we throw in some utilities along with that, we can find a household of 3 to 4 people who would be able to afford a place to rent here on this particular property in a neighborhood that as I recall when I lived there, is an incredibly welcoming community. And I think that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
I'm sorry, seeing no further discussion, we will have a roll call vote.
Okay, this is on the motion to approve the rezoning. Contos.
Yes.
Hart.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Merritt.
Yes.
Ramos.
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Von Mossberg,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
and Anderson.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 11 ayes and 1 absent.
And the rezoning is approved. Our second item for final consideration this evening is an ordinance amendment regarding amplification in community parks. And Ms. Cheryl, do you have a motion for us this evening?
I do. Give me just a second here. Thank you. I was muted. I recommend that on second and final reading, we adopt an ordinance amending chapter 12.40, section 12.40.065 of the Missoula Municipal Code to create subsection 12.40.065A29 for the purpose of requiring the public to obtain an amplification permit for the use of public address systems in the community parks. And may I speak to it?
You may, and I'm not sure who is sharing their screen at the moment. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Cheryl.
Okay, thanks. So this ordinance has been in effect for about 30 years, give or take some there. It continues to be a complaint-based system as it has been in the past. It has not created problems in the past, and it has solved conflicts as they have arisen. I think this is an important ordinance for our neighborhoods and for basically our shared space in this community. I think this solves problems rather than creates them, and I am happy to make that motion and support it. You're muted.
John, sorry, did you say that I could go ahead and talk? I must have missed something there. Got it.
Sorry, I was unable to unmute. My apologies, Ms. Barrett. Yes, please.
Just going by feel here. I wonder if I could ask Ms. Kinsey with Parks and Rec to provide us with a little more information based on some questions that have come up.
Let's go ahead and let's ask those questions, please.
Okay. So one question, Shirley, that has come up has been, sorry, I'm getting really bad feedback. I think that might be better. Okay. Shirley, could you explain why this ordinance is being requested? Several people have wondered why the existing noise ordinance is not adequate to address some of the problems that we've had in our parks in the past. And I wonder if you could speak to that.
Sure, I'll try. I'm going to say I'm no noise sound expert, but this is what I've gathered in my research. So because of the way that sound is measured, you can have nuisance noise and not be over the decibel A measure. Our noise ordinance is specifically measured and weighted as an A scale, which measures treble. There's also a sound level that can be measured in units of C weight decibel. And this is a more suitable measure for low frequency output of bass sound, which actually travels and penetrates further than the treble sound. So by proposing the amplification permit as an ordinance, we essentially do away with some of the complications that is created in measuring sound. In the ordinance, it's in the application itself, the noise amplification permit, we require people to adhere to the noise ordinance. So we're not recreating the wheel here. We're just adding a component to it, and that component's specific to parks. The way our noise ordinance is written, our police can't or won't protect folks using the parks who don't appreciate some of the noise, or who are living right next to parks trying to enjoy their homes, and they can't because of the nuisance noise. Not talking about all noise, but some of it is nuisance noise. So this ordinance is solely about quality of life for those residents who live adjacent to parks. Remember that the community parks have a pretty healthy buffer zone, and that's why we're proposing that amplification happen in our community parks.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey. Ms. Merritt, anything else?
I have a statement that I'd like to make if it's okay. I think Heidi also had some questions, but I'll go ahead and say my piece.
You bet.
I think that this has been construed as a major policy change when really it's not. Parks has had a policy that amplified sound is prohibited in general in our city parks, with the exception of the 9 parks that are listed in the proposed ordinance. And these are places where special events are routinely held. It's also been a requirement that the special events obtain a permit for amplified sound. That's not anything new. It's been parks policy for years, if not decades. And when there have been complaints around loud music at the neighborhood parks like Kiwanis or LaFrey or the BN Plaza, the police have not felt like they had the authority to enforce the park policy because it was policy. And so now we are putting that into the ordinance. And I just want to be clear that this is not about trying to harass musicians who are in the parks playing for their own enjoyment, or perhaps, playing for donations, busking as they term it. We're not out to try and gouge those people for money, and we're not out to try and harass them or give them a reason to get a ticket. What we're trying to do is protect the residents who live adjacent to our neighborhood parks, and that they deserve to have a quality of life. And when you have people who come to the park with their subwoofers in the trunk of their car, and they open the trunk and they run that subwoofer, as Shirley just tried to describe, that the actual decibel level of that may not trigger the noise ordinance, but it shakes all the windows of the buildings adjacent to the park. And I know from having experience and having a neighbor who did that on a regular basis, it is incredibly disturbing, no matter what time of day that's happening. So I just want to be clear that that is the problem that we're trying to address here. Thanks.
And Ms. West?
Hi, I have a couple of questions. So my first one being a very basic question. Shirley, could you just address what fees paid to the Parks Department support? Where does that money go?
So the fees that are collected from amplification permits generally support, first off, the cost of electricity, and then also the administrative costs associated with the permit, administrative support from our front desk, as well as my time. It supports park operations. Crowds mean cleanup, and especially if there's alcohol involved, it means a lot more toilet paper. So generally, the permit just helps overall support.
And I have two more questions, I think. My second question is about I guess, the overall ordinance. This obviously amends an existing ordinance, and the ordinance in its entirety does have an enforcement section. And I was just curious, I was just hoping you could address what enforcement on, I guess, all of our park policies generally looks like. As in what's the, it's not an automatic fine when someone, for example, is smoking at a playground. Like, what is the order of operation, I suppose, when
Right.
Yeah.
So I think what you're asking is, what are the consequences of not getting a permit?
No, yes, I guess that's correct. Yeah. What would the process be if someone who doesn't have a permit but should have one?
Okay.
What that conversation's like.
So generally, I think it, especially in the neighborhood parks, I believe that the police would approach it just like the animal control does with animals running at large. They warn people first, and then if there's if they continue, then they end up getting cited. But it's not like, it's definitely complaint driven. So it's not like we're going to be cruising the neighborhood parks looking for people amplifying sound. If people are considerate and they're, in their own little group, and people don't complain very much. It's the ones that are a nuisance and are creating problems for everyone else in parks that they deserve police attention.
And then my final question's around, I guess, there are times when the Parks Department makes exceptions. And I think this summer there was an event where musicians played all along the trail with slightly amplified music, so not very loud, but amplified. And I'm curious if you could just maybe expand on what an administrative process is to get exceptions for these kind of creative community events that do happen.
Well, so that's news to me, because the special use permit was for acoustic music, but obviously we didn't have any complaints. So we have actually engaged with the same group to repeat that event again along the trail. It was well received, and we think that it was a good event. So they were very responsible in the way that they presented it, and it's a process. It's a permitting process.
Thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Anderson?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I think that, to me, there's a really big distinction between community parks and neighborhood parks. I live near a neighborhood park. It's a small park, lots of sledding happens. My house is so close that I actually hear the kids yell, "Wee!" as they go down the hill. And from time to time, groups of kids get together with, their small little, Bluetooth speakers as they're like kicking the soccer ball around. All of that is fine under what we're trying to do here. I think it's the larger community parks, Bonner Park, for example, where large events are happening, that we're asking for a permit process to happen. Part of it is for all the reasons that Shirley laid out, to let people know that this event is happening. Also, so that if you are having an event, a wedding in a park or whatever, and you go to get a permit, you know that there's not somebody else who's also doing the same thing in that same park at the same time to potentially ruin your event. It's also, to have some sort of level of control. I heard the comments last week and saw lots of the comments online, and I think that, as Ms. Merritt pointed out, that this has really sort of gotten very misconstrued on what the intent behind this is, why we're doing this. This isn't a way to, try to, squash the soul of Missoula, as was one commenter said, to hamper the ability for our many talented musicians who want to get together and jam with their friends. And so I think there does need to be order, and there's places for all people who want to take part in the things that make our community great. And there are large parks for amplified sound, and there's small community parks for small, gatherings for people to get together. And this is just simply trying to put some sideboards in, clarify the regulations, and kind of clean up our ordinances. So I don't think that this is as onerous and big brotherly as it potentially has been made out to be. So I will be in support.
Ms. Hart.
Thank you. Shirley, we've gotten a lot of comments, especially from the musical part of our community. And it seems like there are folks that are really concerned about just being able to have some small group practices. And just last week I was at an event and I brought a little amplifier myself because we were going to be talking and there was going to be wind and without that small amount of amplification, no one would have been heard. So I think there are some folks that see that there's a difference between lots of amplification and just enough so that you can hear one another. And I'm wondering if there was ever any discussion about what types of amplification systems are permitted so that a bass player or guitar player would be able to participate in a small group setting without going down the whole rabbit hole of a big production and getting a permit.
That's a good question, and I don't really have a good answer for you because, like I said, the neighborhood parks are basically complaint driven. So if you're in a larger neighborhood park and you're away from the residents and you're playing with your fellow musicians, you're not going to bother anybody, right? So it really is complaint driven. You can't really make exceptions if you're not applying for a permit, So, and we generally discourage people amplifying in neighborhood parks because there is no buffer between some of the houses and the park.
Okay, thanks.
Seeing no further discussion, folks in the audience care to weigh in? Got a number of hands up. Mr. Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council people. I reside in Ward 3, vote with my family in Ward 5. I am opposed to this ordinance being passed. General, as it currently stands, I would like to see language potentially that would exclude these portable Bluetooth speakers so that people cannot be necessarily tested on that when that's not going to be an issue. We're not talking about subwoofers and things of that nature. Going back to what Miss Merritt said, a person in a car, our Councilwoman Merritt said, people in a car with subwoofers. There's already language in regard to that in city code regarding decibel levels, bass or no bass, mufflers from Harley Davidsons, Jake brakes, things of that nature. These are already there. Those are things that can be enforced. That has nothing to do with parks. If somebody's parked next to a park, that's on a city thoroughfare or way. Regarding to the costs of this permit, I think that maximum, maybe $5-10 of electricity, probably about 10 minutes to view a permit. So maybe $5-10 administrative time. Parks are already there. Music doesn't necessarily bring it. If there's going to be concerns with toilet paper, the limit of the size of an event, people would already, if they're going to have a gathering, they can have a permit. Okay, this is my park for the day. Your presence is not needed. Please go to another park with your speaker if that's what we're talking about here. All right, so this is all in Missoula City Code, Chapter 9, Section 30. It looks like you guys got that email circulated around. Y'all are ready to address some of those. So I do appreciate that, and maybe some of the questions from last week that constituents made. Notice that all of your constituents that commented last week were not in favor of this ordinance, at least currently as it is written. A comparison, 60 decibels. This is your current Chapter 9, that 30, 60 decibels from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That in comparison is a normal conversation level from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., 55 decibels. That is the equivalent to a running household refrigerator. So you don't really need rocket science to figure out base frequencies are higher frequencies that if it's pretty common sense to an officer if he needed to use the current city code to address these nuisances. They already have all the tools in the current code to be able to do just that. Coach Shane talked, people are courteous. They are good to each other. They're neighborly. If somebody, oh, ma, I haven't heard that music before. I kind of like that. Oh, maybe I don't like that. Maybe I'll go to a different part of the park. Maybe I'll play my own music. I've never encountered myself playing music in a neighborhood park. If I'm playing volleyball, maybe at Kiwanis, anybody saying to turn that off. Maybe that's because I have such excellent taste in music. I don't know. How is this going to affect maybe events like La Kickball Missoula down at McCormick Park? Are they going to have to spend $48 every single time that somebody has a speaker system going on? I don't think that would be a great idea. This could also, FUPS, Summer Softball Carnival. So those are some concerns there. Definitely the cost. I think that the language should be amended to exclude portable Bluetooth speakers, and that if needed to, and it was becoming a nuisance, if there was a complaint, a responding officer would already have the ammo to be able to make the right call. Respect the work that the police do and their judgment in these situations, and I think that you giving them the ability to do that is an excellent idea. So once again, I would like to see the language change on that. Ideally, I'd like to see this ordinance shut down completely, and agree with everybody who's commented so far in regards to that. Already kind of brought up, if people are going to have a graduation, a wedding, that's their park, as far as I know. Okay, so no one else can really affect them. If they want to get a permit for that because they want to have that special event, this would not affect that whatsoever. Again, once again, I feel like the Missoula City Code, whether it's vehicles or loud sounds, the fine folks in Missoula PD already have a plethora of tools and citations that they can use. And this makes it feel cost prohibitive, and it gets real pop-up and spontaneity in regards to what most people in our general public like. So that being said, I urge a no vote or send back to committee for reconsideration on this issue. Thank you very much, council, Mr. Mayor and council people, for your time. This is my first time kind of speaking on an issue, and I look forward to maybe being a little bit more involved in our city government going forward. Thank you again.
Thank you. And I have S. Taylor. S. Taylor? You're muted, it appears.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, hi. I would vote and urge of no on this vote as it is currently worded, just because of the fact that I can't speak on behalf of everyone, but I think I can speak on behalf of a lot of people commenting last week and now that we don't want to have giant subwoofer base cars in the parking lot at all times. That is not our intention. That is not what we believe in. What we're concerned about, and it sort of reiterated my thoughts already since last week, is we've heard multiple interpretations of what this motion means, but it does not reflect what the motion wording actually is. The motion is very simple, with no specifics. Like the previous speaker said, the decibel levels do not reflect already what you already hear in parks. And so I think that it could be reworded. I don't think that anyone here is, or I'm speaking for myself, that I don't think that this is something that can be so black and white. I think that it could be reworded and there could be a medium to find a solution in between that would make sure everybody is happy. None of us want to go to parks and annoy neighbors. That's not our intention. But the way this is set now, it makes it completely black and white, and it also makes it up to the interpretation of whoever decides they don't like what they're hearing, rather than specifics. And I'm concerned that this could snowball, and I know that's been said before, but it could snowball. And there's been multiple council members have said that this hasn't been a big issue before, so I don't get why it's a big issue now. Again, the vagueness of the motion is cause for concern. If it was reworded, I think that it could work out very well for everyone involved. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Shaner.
Yes, yeah, Shaner in the house. What's up, Big Mayor? What's up, City Council? I'm just thinking my poor heart is just breaking for those property owners like near parks. I mean, like anytime the choo-choo train, that built our nation goes through, they must be so irate. And every time those jackhammers, that are building our town all day long, they must have like a really tough time of life. But that's also the choo-choo train, the jackhammers, sound, there's volume, but rhythm and vibrations and patterns of vibration can do much. They can push away, they can repel, they can heal the body if performed in the right way. So the question is, like, what are we complaining about? And if you guys got to make it a permit thing, then make it free, for crying out loud. Not everyone is rich. Not everyone is property owners right now. Like a lot of people going into the parks, myself included, like I'm renting, but the homeowner is selling the house. So now I don't know where I'm going to actually be able to like play my music in a couple months. Parks would be dope. And I just want to leave on, for anyone who's paying attention, you can't put this into law or ordinance. We all have our needs, and our needs are unique to each and every one of us. You can give yourself permission to communicate your needs to your neighbor. You can see that person who might have, I don't know, some sort of nuisance to you. You may be a good neighbor and let your needs be known to that person, that individual, with the subwoofer, with the treble, with the, I don't know, with whatever's going on, with the weeds that are going into your lawn. Let's not give our power away to the city, to the cops, to handle it. Just respect yourself, honor your needs. If you need it quieter than it is, just know that your fellow man also has their needs as well. And let's be neighbors, please. Like, don't have someone else take care of your issues, unless you have to. And then we already have the noise ordinances as it is. So no on this. We don't need more ordinances. We don't need more ability for cops to cause trouble. Like we all know what it's noisy. Missoula's noisy right now in particular. But let's fill it with more joyful noise, more fun noise than the choo-choo trains and the jackhammers and the cha-ching, cha-ching of the sound of money. Let's actually just have the sound of joy. So thank you guys all so much. You guys are all awesome, and Missoula's great.
Thank you. Mr. Huntley?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Thanks for letting me speak. So I am a bit concerned because I'm actually someone who plays music in Karas Park often, and started at the beginning of COVID when there was no opportunity for music indoors. So I started playing music outdoors, and people would come and show up and dance, and it made the space better. I played, some of you I'm sure walked by while I was playing down by Karas Park by Brennan's Wave. And I do have amplification, and sometimes it does get kind of loud. But people are enjoying it. It creates a better environment. When I went down there initially, and there was nothing happening for a couple of months at the beginning of COVID. The reason I started was I went down, and the environment down there was just hostile. Homeless people sitting around making comments at girls walking by in bathing suits after getting out tubing. Just people were angry. And so I went down and started playing music, and it completely changed the atmosphere. There was one time where somebody came up and asked me to stop playing because it was loud for them. So I stopped immediately. Like Shane commented before, you know, if somebody asks, I'm a respectful neighbor, and I love this city. And the reason that I do what I do is for the sake of other people. I'm not out there playing music for myself. I do enjoy it. It is a fun practice, but truly, the reason I do it is for others. And so I guess what I would ask is that there would be an amendment for local musicians, because the language is so obscure. Perhaps we could change the language so that a local musician wouldn't be, because I think what this is harming most is consistent local musicians who play in parks often. Not crazy rager parties or one-off events that are loud in the Bonner Band Shelf, but it would hurt like the little street band that plays under the little tent in Karas Park a couple of times a week. It would hurt me. I can't afford to pay $48 every time I want to play. So is there a way that we could amend that so that a local performing artist could get, say, a season pass and pay $48 once? And, you know, some way so that the people who are being harmed aren't the local musicians. Like, sure, tax the people that want to throw an event. That's a different story. They're making money off of that. But if there's this language that doesn't make sense and it's hard to understand, and it's like, wait, do I need to pay $48 every time I play music at Karas Park? Like, I can't do that. So am I breaking the law by doing that? Like, I don't want to break the law. I don't want to, but I do want to play music. So I would just urge that at least it would be reconsidered and the language would be clarified, and that local artists would be considered. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And Daniel B.
Hello. I'm a delivery driver in Missoula, and outdoor music has made my job more enjoyable whenever it occurs. I'm thinking mainly of the downtown area, and it helps pass the time when I make deliveries. Reading this amendment, it actually affects the whole city and not just the parks. There is language about residential, commercial, and industrial zones. I could be just reading that incorrectly, but as far as I can tell, it's a citywide amendment. Music is really important for Missoula. It's one of the great things about Missoula. And I don't think we need any extra enforcement in this area. I'm against this amendment because it seems to be stifling for outdoor music, which is really cool and awesome in Missoula. And I can only see this as being used against musicians. So in summary, I'm against this amendment.
Thank you, sir. And Ms. Housel.
My name is Andy Helsel. No miss, please, Mr. Mayor. I am a resident of Ward 2, and while I share concerns that have already been expressed, one that I think is just my most pressing concern, my general comment is there's a lot of comments from council members during the discussion this evening and questions about this ordinance, where council members are using words like "that's not the intent." And I would just caution us anytime that we are focused on the intent of an ordinance that unequivocally has given more power to a law enforcement agency, because the intent is not always relevant. It's rarely relevant. What's relevant is the impact, and the likelihood that this impacts certain demographics in our community more so than others it's just really, really high. There was a woman in Minnesota yesterday who intended supposedly to grab her taser and instead grabbed her gun and fired a shot. Her intent doesn't matter. The impact that a man was murdered is what matters. So when we talk about the intent of this ordinance, we need to think about what the actual impact will be. And the likely impact, from the way I see it, of increasing the amount of power given to police to have authority to be able to respond, potentially ticket and or arrest in literally the best case scenario, that's all that happens, is not worth the risk, because the likelihood is that those primarily impact unhoused folks in our community and BIPOC folks in our community. All the research says that that's where policing is primarily focused. It's true here in Missoula as well. I've seen it myself. We need to think past intent and think about the impact. I don't think this ordinance is worth it. Sounds like the language is pretty terrible. And in general, it's likely to impact certain folks much more than others. So it seems, again, like a primary focus is on the property owners who are calling and complaining, and the thought is not going to where the impact will be.
Thank you. And Maria Zepeda.
Hi, can you guys hear me all right?
We can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council people. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Maria Zepeda, and I've been a musician and an advocate for music for the past 8 years here in Missoula, Montana. I'd like to echo the messages of the speakers before me. And I understand that this is a cleanup ordinance, and the mission behind this is to protect park users and neighborhoods or neighbors around the parks. I think this is important to emphasize, and I appreciate the efforts of the City Council to address the concerns of the few complaints they have received in regards to Kiwanis Park. I ask that the City Council receive the concerns expressed at the April 5th City Council meeting and the comments that went before I with the same lens in protecting those this ordinance could negatively affect. With the proposed language of the current ordinance, its vagueness and how your intention may not be the intention of law enforcement. With the language of this ordinance being as ambiguous as it is, it will be difficult for individuals to know if they are violating the law, especially since it is being described as an added tool for law enforcement. In echoing that this is being used as a tool for law enforcement, this is where we have to be as clear and concise as possible. We do not have room for error. We do not have room for inconsistencies. I ask that City Council consider extending the deadline of this ordinance to address the lack of clarity within it to include exactly what types of public address systems or stereo systems qualified for needing a permit. I ask this as it is important to clarify so that we can protect those this ordinance refers to and the system that created this law to avoid inconsistencies in upholding this ordinance. I wish to work with the City Council in adopting a law that is clear to all of the public what it refers to when addressing types of public address systems and what levels of prosecution are if violated. I appreciate your time and thoughts.
Thank you. Josh.
Hi, Council, Mr. Mayor, this is Josh Decker, resident of Ward 1. I have problems with the ordinance, the amendment that's put forward. Numerous problems. Certainly, I think that whenever we're granting more tools and power to law enforcement officers, that we need to be absolutely crystal clear about what that means for the citizens of our town. I'm in listening to the Parks Department, Ms. Kinsey, describing the amendment. She, quote, didn't have a good answer to some of the questions. So maybe we should table it till they do have a good answer to some of the questions. Several people have raised the issue of the choo-choo trains. I live 100 yards off of the connecting yard on the north side of the tracks. And there are times when the noise from that connecting yard shakes the dishes in my cabinets and shakes the windows of my house. And times that I have called to try and put the existing noise ordinance into use against a powerful corporation have fallen on deaf ears and been ignored. And it seems like we're putting more tools in place to enforce inner citizen conflict, where when, decibel measurements that would be 3 times the permissible value coming out of the train yard are completely ignored. The ordinance as it stands is selectively enforced, and my complaints have fallen unanswered in regards to noise that exists in my neighborhood. And finally, I would just say that in a complaint-based system, when a police officer comes into a park and says, we got a complaint, you need to shut it down, what mechanism is going to be in place for the police substantiating that complaint to the person that it's levied against? And it becomes kind of a blank check tool for law enforcement, and that's not what we need. We need selective, specific, and focused ordinance that addresses problems that are, more largely felt in our community than these noise issues. I would urge you to vote no, or at least table this ordinance till some of these questions can be answered. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. T. Goodvoice.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I spoke about this last week as well. Yeah, I'm another local musician. I'm Scott Bucani. Born in Missoula, currently residing on the Blackfeet side of the Hell's Gates. Yeah, I don't agree with this still. I believe that it's too broad. You guys are talking about a specific problem, and it's the unintended consequences of this language that people have a problem with. When you guys have a specific problem that you're trying to solve, just solve that specific problem. The unintended consequences of this is what the community has an issue with. And if you're listening to the community, it's pretty much everybody. I've heard one council member for, so that's the first person that I've actually talked to that's for this, but pretty much everyone that has heard about what's going on with this, doesn't agree with it. But the problem is just this broad language, you know, where the potential of who could be harmed by this. You guys are saying it's a complaint-based system, so the potential could be that one person complains, the police now have cause to, you know, shut something down where it was actually causing a lot of positivity in the community. You know, now that that's the consequence, you know, it's like the worst case scenario is what you guys got to think of, because that's what's going to happen. You know, it's just going to, you know, someone will be harmed by this. Maybe it won't be me. Maybe I won't have a problem with it, but maybe it'll be another musician who, you know, someone doesn't agree with that type of music, you know, then that person gets harmed. Anytime someone gets unjustly harmed by, you know, some sort of bias, you know, it's just a recipe for, you know, disaster. So, you know, somebody spoke about intent, and that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, the intent of this, you know, for solving a specific problem is what the problem is. And you know, some of the ideas, I mean, and also, what about bullhorn protesting? You know, people who protest and have bullhorns, does that give, you know, the police an opportunity to shut the protest down or take their bullhorn away? Or, you know, what's going to be the consequence of something like that? So yeah, it's just, you know, so as far as the language goes for the specific ordinance, that's, you know, I think that you guys should vote no for this. You know, as far as the cost for the permit, that's like, for me, those are two separate subjects almost. So to argue the noise ordinance, I would definitely vote no. The fact that there's a cost to this is just ridiculous. You know, that to me is like, that should be a no just for that reason. You know, to debate the ordinance, you know, I would still say, you know, this is, it's definitely a no. But, you know, the fact that there's a cost to this it's, you know, that's ridiculous to me. So I definitely say vote no. And you know, if there's a specific problem that you guys are trying to solve that problem. You know, if there's something specific with this broad language that can have unintentional consequences for whoever isn't, you know, whoever gets a complaint against them, is the problem that I have with this particular ordinance. So I'd say go back to the drawing board, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Harrell.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and Council. I just want to take some time to kind of talk about what I talked about last week and echo a lot of the sentiment that I'm hearing this week, which sounds, coming from all fronts. That idea of intent stands out to me more than anything else. And I think that needs to be written clearly in the law. The way this stands right now, it is far too vague. If it was something where that intent was actually written out and more specifics of, you know, some folks talked about Bluetooth speakers. That's not like, there's no specifics of what entails like getting a permit in this. And just kind of wondering if that's something that could be tabled and, you know, looked at and advised before moving forward with this. I'd also like to say I would completely agree with the folks that talked about increased law enforcement and what that's going to mean for our community. And in these cases, I don't know if that's the right decision right now. I think it's actually the wrong one. These situations should be solved on a community basis with community members, rather than giving law enforcement more power, especially with what we're seeing across the country with law enforcement currently. Yeah, I would just like a lot more clarity on this law, and would like to see it revised, and would like to see specifics, and that's what I'm looking for moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Jesse Seiki.
Can you all hear me?
We can.
Good evening, council. I wanted to say thanks for the time, but I also want to say an enormous amount of love and respect for dispatchers. Let's start by saying that. Love your dispatchers. I want to echo the ambiguity point of this ordinance. The ambiguity is really what needs to be addressed. All the way down to, it does state these 9 parks or parks designated by the park director and the designee. So there are issues within the language as it stands. What you're hearing is a lot of mistrust. Mr. Hess, you spoke about the pressures of limiting municipal governance across the board. Why take this time and compromise constituent trust in the city council by pushing through an ordinance that has this much ambiguity? You've heard folks talk about apprehension. Now's the time where it's in your hands, where you can even make officers' lives and jobs easier. The language needs to be addressed. I want to further this by saying it's been a long winter. And so let's address the most common denominator and the most common person that will be impacted by this. And these are folks that are in congregative living, block housing communities. They need somewhere to go and express. And removing that or placing a barrier in front of them, or these inequities with the ambiguity of the language, leads to stifling. So right now, this long winter, we all need somewhere to go and enjoy ourselves. I want to use an analogy. After Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans was unsure if they were going to go ahead with Mardi Gras. After a lot of debate, deliberation, and compromise, they decided to have Mardi Gras and hold it. And look what happened. The whole city celebrated when they won the Super Bowl following. I would advocate that the city council takes the time to take it back to committee for relanguaging. And that's about all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Larson.
Yes, hi, this is Matt Larson, Ward 3. Good to hear you again. Marion, if you could mute your mic, I can hear feedback. So thank you to Ms. Kinsey for kind of giving a layman's overrun of sound pressure level metering and measurements. It's been laid out by numerous commentators before. This is redundant and superfluous as far as an ordinance. Everything's already governed by sound ordinance. This is just going to make more contacts for police in city parks during the daytime. The SPL measurements are in the park's permit process for events. This is also going to be employed against protests, unplanned protests or protests that are kettled by the police into city parks. And then they will use their force to confiscate said speakers. And we've bought them all the tools. This city council, as a matter of fact, has bought them all the tools to do so, such as 29-inch collapsible rods and helmets and so on and so forth, and multiple thousands of dollars of bullets and whatever. It is a money grab by the city, by its 3 largest departments. You know, like, this is just one of them. Parks Department is a great one. We've gone back and forth with volleys from council people about how this is already existing and unneeded. And so I just want to prepare the public for the inevitable city council rubber stamp from the mayor and his majority here. We don't need this. This affects musicians greatly who have been impacted incredibly during the pandemic. I am an engineer. I worked for Big Sean. I was on tour with Big Sean. I know very much everything there is to know about measurement levels. I'd love to work with the city on this one, but it's gonna be rubber stamped. My friends last week who perform at the X's just informed me that the outlet is now padlocked there. It's pennies of electricity. Like, this is like not a big significant thing, especially when the Parks Department is leaving on the heaters over the summertime for the walking bridge down by the Reserve Street, for the bike and walking bridge. There's huge bloat in all these main 3 city departments, and they're subsidizing it with musicians on musicians' backs now. It's utterly it's just another fast forwarding to yuppie hellscape. So thank you very much, City Council. Love to see you do this, especially just like the city police budget. You hear everyone talk in support of sensible trimming of the budget or one outcome, and you do the exact opposite. It's so consistent. The intent is very much noticed. So take note, everyone watching, how your city council votes, and let's get these people out the next election cycle. It's ridiculous that we accept this. I just think people don't even know, and they won't open up the meetings.
John, you're muted.
Sorry, seeing no additional comment from the audience this evening. Mr. Hess.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to refer this back to committee, and I'd like to speak to that.
Mr. Hess.
So this was intended to be a benign ordinance to codify a decades-long process or departmental procedure. It appears it's obvious that there's some additional work to be done here from a communication standpoint, from a community involvement standpoint. I want to say, first of all, that I think intent statements do matter. We have them in our code in other places. There's other bits of I mean, there are laws where intent, there are criminal laws where intent it clearly has importance. I think that the city's stated intent could go into an intent statement and could make this ordinance stronger. I also want to say that this is a city that has permitted a naked bike ride. The city does not shy away from permitting things that are controversial. This is, I think, being a little bit blown out of proportion as something to suppress protests, and it is not. It is it's intended to address edge cases where people are being discourteous in our parks. But I think it's important that we have a more robust discussion around protests, around Bluetooth speakers, around small wattage amplifiers, around some of the fringe cases that could create gray areas. So, and I'd welcome anyone who commented to get in touch with any constructive feedback as far as any specific language. But I think it's worth kicking tires on this a little longer.
Mr. Hess has asked this item be returned to committee, and without objection, that will happen. Ms. West and Mr. Von Osberg, did you have something brief with regard to this?
Sorry, still muted, wrong button. Just super briefly, I wanted to maybe explain a little bit what lives where in our code. Maybe I'll use things like fees, for example, live in resolutions, so they can be more easily changed and updated, and we reassess them every year. So that is why that is not a part of this language. This is an ordinance, and then a lot of the parameters of how an ordinance is enacted often lives in administrative process. And I just wanted to point out there are these three different tools, we'll call it, that work together to make ordinances work and function. And many of the comments I've heard either apply to fees or to how ordinances are enforced, and that often lives in administrative process. So I think that it does warrant more discussion, but just want folks to know that when we are discussing an ordinance amendment, there are these other pieces attached to it that aren't a part of the sentences we're seeing, if that makes sense. And it is normal for things to not be entirely defined in an ordinance because we live in a world that changes, and our ordinances don't change as often or as quickly, and we want to be able to change with the needs of our community, and that is why some of the finer details live in those other places. So just for clarification.
Mr. Van Osberg.
Thanks. I think Jordan covered some of the opportunity in his comments about sending it back to committee around, he mentioned the Bluetooth speakers, perhaps small wattage amplifiers, and appreciate Heidi and Julie's work on this. I was in touch with them over the weekend, and we could get, I think, some of Julie's language around intent into the ordinance. So thanks.
All right, with that, the item has been returned to committee. Ms. Cheryl, do you have any sense of when you might take it up?
I think we have a pretty busy day this Wednesday, so I would like to see it the following Wednesday. If that is, I think that would work.
Great, thank you. With that, we have no additional items for final communication. Final consideration rather. I'll pass on communications from the mayor and start general council comments with Mr. Von Osberg.
I'll pass.
Ms. Merritt.
I pass.
Ms. Hart.
I'll pass.
Ms. West.
So for anyone that's driven by the West Side Park, you can see playground equipment being installed. And I just want to say it's so incredibly exciting to see the new preschool playground coming together and being realized. So if you haven't driven by it, take a look at it.
Ms. Jones.
Pass.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. West, for pointing that out. It's super exciting. I was driving by there yesterday. I do want to point out to the community, we have quite a few attendees who are very active in our community and would love to solicit their help in contacting Governor Gianforte. Unfortunately, Senate Bill 215 has passed both the House and the Senate, and this bill would allow any business or individual to legally discriminate against a person if they claim it burdens their religious expression. This is a horrible bill, and it legalizes discrimination in our state, which is not a value that we have here in Missoula. So would really encourage for everyone to reach out to the governor to encourage him to veto this bill. I don't hold out a lot of hope, but definitely want to apply as much community pressure as possible. And you can do so by calling the governor at 444. I am so terrible at phone numbers. I apologize. We'll start them again here at the top. 406-444-3111. Again, you're asking the governor to veto SB 215, which allows for legal discrimination in the state of Montana, and that is not a Montana value, and it is certainly not a Missoula value. So want to put that out there for folks to have their voices heard.
Mr. Hess.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll pass.
Ms. Scher.
Thanks, and thank you, Stacy, for that. I really have been urging people to pay attention at the legislative level, especially this year. And since we do have people on that are active in the community, I just thank you for bringing that up. My comment is that I just want to tell people that walk-in vaccine clinics are now available. So we're doing really well. We need to keep going on that. Lucky's Market tomorrow morning has a walk-in vaccine clinic from 9 to 11 for the Moderna vaccine. You have to be 18 or older for that. Wednesday, pretty much all day from 9 to 3 p.m. Pfizer. If you're a 16 or 17-year-old, you have to be with your guardian. On Friday, but it's for all age groups. On Friday from 9 to 11, they have Moderna. So those are walk-in clinics. You don't have to make an appointment. So I know that has been a little bit of a tricky point for some people. So please get vaccinated.
Mr. Contos.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Mr. Ramos.
Pass. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Hasika.
I'll pass as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. With that, we will move on to committee reports. We have but one of those this evening, and that is the bond resolution for the AC Hotel. And Ms. Jones, a motion, please.
Yes, I will make the motion, which is to adopt a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of $1,886,105 subordinate lien tax increment urban renewal revenue bond for the Front Street Urban Renewal District Series 2021 to pay or reimburse the costs of certain improvements undertaken in connection with an urban renewal project, prescribing the form and terms thereof and the security therefore. And I'd like to speak to it, but I'm not sure what sequence you go in.
Ms. Jones.
Okay, thank you. We heard this in committee last Wednesday. We're not really going to cover any new ground here, but I do want to point out that these this TIF disbursement went to Berry Utilities, which is a benefit to the community. It created more expansive sidewalks that not only look a lot better, but also help to slow traffic. And it did the deconstruction on the prior building that was on that site, which is in line with our conservation and climate action plan because a lot less cement was created due to the fill that was created by the deconstruction. And we also honored our 0 by 50 waste initiative. So if you're at all interested in environmental issues, this is a good thing. And this is how we get this done. So there was a lot of public benefit that was created by this, and that's why we do these TIF disbursements in these scenarios. In this URD, we're also looking at some public benefit projects in the long run, hopefully affordable housing and things like that in the old library block. This helps create the increment so that we can build that. So that's how we prime the pump to create the money to go towards those items. Finally, there has been a history with this council of voting against these votes, which are basically formalities. We decided this issue back in the summer of 2019. It was decided then, the work has been done, we made the commitment, now we have to basically pay the bill. And I get pretty distressed at this pattern that's evolving on council where people vote against things that they just don't agree with. But frankly, this decision was made 2 years ago, and I hope you all read the legal opinion that Jim Nugent, our city attorney, sent to all city councilors today, talking about the fact that that's right. Sometimes a prior council makes a decision and you still have to honor it. So I think it's important to recognize that that impacts us in the long run. As I spoke during the committee meeting on Wednesday, that when we vote against things like this that are a formality, it impacts our credibility, our integrity. It can impact our credit rating. This is not good. And in my world, when I make a commitment or a promise or sign a contract, I pay it. So that's the way the city runs also. And I just wanted to clarify that. So I'm very much in favor of this and would love to see a unanimous vote on it tonight.
Mr. Ramos.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say first, before I begin, that I made no such commitment, no such promise. I voted against this, and this is a body, and I refuse to be held hostage by a developer or by something that, yes, I read Mr. Nugent's opinion. He didn't say anything specifically about this prior resolution, though I did notice that. He said that, yeah, certainly sometimes the council can be bound by its successors, but he didn't address this issue specifically, and I don't think this has actually been addressed just because I don't think there's been enough turnover to really make a difference. So I don't really understand why I'm trying to be bullied into making a vote that'll take the city further into debt and extend this TIF district by another 3 years. There's actually a bill going on right now in the state legislature that if it passes, it will prohibit cities from extending TIF districts by bond vote. So to me, I think it's not only my public duty, but it's also my public duty to point out that a $1.8 million bond should go to the public for a vote. I don't think there should be a bunch of elected politicians making these types of financial commitments for extended periods of time. It really makes no sense to me. So if you guys want to bully me for upholding my democratic duty to vote the way that I was elected to do, then go ahead and do so. If you want to kowtow to the big corporations, that's also in your right. To me, I don't think it's right to extend these TIF districts. I think that the public should have a vote on that because it does raise taxes across the city. And it was also brought up that the payback on this was about 8 years. That is not correct. That is not including the interest on this debt and the total P&I on it. And all these things, Ellen Buchanan couldn't even answer that question for me when I brought it up to her last week. So this is another example of why the legislature is trying to fix this problem, because unfortunately this has been so abused. And again, I've talked to people from all different sides of this issue that agree that TIF has been abused. And again, I feel so bad right now for not voting to give this TIF handout to a struggling small business like the Marriott Hotel right now in the middle of a pandemic. It's really going to be hard for me to sleep at night. So I will say no on this bad boy, and I am very proud to do so. So I appreciate that.
Sorry, I was muted again. Ms. West.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight that these funds went to Berry Utilities, wider sidewalks, and deconstruction. I think simply saying that these are bonds for the AC hotel really doesn't communicate accurately what this funding is going towards. And it really is going towards having increased direction in what development in our community looks like. A hotel could have been built here by right, but MRA involvement allows us to both have impact on the project that is being developed so that it has a greater public benefit. In this case, it does get us closer to our climate goals. It gets us closer to our zero waste goals as a community, and it creates a more user-friendly space for people who are in the public right away. And then in addition to that original, project impact, it allows us to leverage this private investment into the future. There already has been one affordable housing project that has received MRA contributions in this district, and that project, received similar benefits. It included all of the public right-of-way improvements and the deconstruction of the original structure on that site. We are statutorily limited as to what MRA funds can go towards. It can't pay for more than that in, an affordable housing project either. But I support this project and the bond measure, and just wanted to point out that it gets us closer to where we want to be as a community more broadly.
Sorry, Ms. Merritt?
Yeah, I want to make a quick correction that this money isn't being paid to the Marriott hotel chain. That's not who the money is going to. So that, just to make sure that the record is clear, the recipient of the funds is, if I understand correctly, and somebody please intervene if I'm not, but the contract says Missoula Investors LLC. And I think the main point that I want to make is, and Gwen touched on this, but the way that tax increment financing works is that we have to invest in things that make money in order to be able to invest in things that don't make so much money. And if we invest and get this increment from the hotel, then we have money in the coffers to pay for affordable housing projects like Heidi was just referencing. That we can't just spend 100% of the TIF money on affordable housing, because then we don't have any increment to work with. So it's important that there's a mix of investments with this money.
All right, seeing no further discussion. Anyone in the audience care to comment? Mr. Larson. Mr. Larson.
Yes, Matt Larson, Ward 3. Nice to see you. This is just another step in the ever-evolving shell game of Missoula City and its budget. There's many lacking parts of it, and there's many problems in it. Mayor, if you could mute your mic, please. I'm getting feedback again. The problem is that we're essentially using TIF in this robbing Peter to pay Paul scheme. And personally, I just wouldn't believe much of anything that our city quote unquote legal advisors have to say, as they've banned me from even discussing anything with any city department or calling any city phone number. And that's neither here nor there. We'll be meeting with attorneys this week on that. So that might be developing a little further than maybe some of the legal advisors at the city had expected. And I think it's indicative of, again, a problem with the budget and a problem with interest. And when the city can't even produce a capital assets list, it's another red flag. This similar misuse of TIF funding, which I agree wholeheartedly 100% with Mr. Ramos, is being misused by the city. And it's part of MRA, the Parks Department, and the police. Like we shuffle money around in the city to where it goes, and they don't want to show us the capital assets, and they don't want to show us under the hood. They only want to show us the new additions to the budget, and they want to continue adding on ERD and SIDs and TIFs to their heart's content, instead of actually addressing those funds to what they're actually assigned for. And to Ms. Merritt's point that it's not going to the Marriott is a franchise. Missoula Investors LLC, as you probably might know, is probably the franchise that is in the state of Montana. So it is very much going to the Marriott in lieu of in the way of a franchise licensing agreement that they've undoubtedly paid for, that we're offsetting as taxpayers now, that you're holding over our heads, our local library, our sidewalks, and all this other stuff that's already paid for in the budget if the budget was actually balanced and actually effectively utilized and wasn't just a way to shuffle money. That's why the Affordable Housing Trust Fund exists. It's mismanagement of our budget and misuse of our times as elected officials in making the appropriate decisions for the last 12 years. But you've overregulated the housing market and gotten us here. So you can't hold this over our heads. You can't say that if we don't pass this TIF thing, we're not gonna get affordable housing. That's ridiculous.
And that was 3 minutes, Mr. Larson. Seeing no further discussion or any hands up in the audience, we will have a roll call vote.
Okay, on the resolution, Harp.
Yes.
Hang on, my votes aren't recording. Try another screen. Or not. Well, there's always the good old-fashioned paper. Harp is yes. Hess?
Yes.
And it's covering my screen, but I think it's Jones next.
Yes, it is, and yes.
Okay, thanks. Merritt?
Yes.
Ramos?
No.
And Cheryl?
Yes.
Vasika? No. Von Lossberg?
Yes.
I knew that was going to happen. I was going to get in the middle of it and then it was going to come back to life. West?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
And Contos?
No.
All right. I have 8 ayes and 3 nays and 1 absent.
And the motion is approved. We have no additional committee reports this evening. Our only item of new business is that legislative update. You have all seen that report from lobbyists and following the deliberations of the Montana legislature. Anyone have anything on that? All right, seeing none, are there any additional items to be referred? Seeing none of those, any miscellaneous communications, reports, petitions, or announcements? All right, seeing none, as always, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your service and we will be adjourned.